My name is Ava Bennett. I am 33 years old, and I am a trauma surgery resident in Seattle. 5 years ago, my family erased me from their lives. They believed I was a drug addict who threw away medical school and chose a reckless life over responsibility. My father cut me off financially. My mother stopped answering my calls. My older sister made sure I no longer existed in that house. Last month, I was standing in Trauma Bay 2 when the double doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in, shouting vitals, pushing a stretcher covered in blood and rain. The patient was unstable. Blood pressure dropping. Heart rate climbing. The kind of case that gives you seconds to act, not minutes. Right behind that stretcher, 2 people forced their way into the hallway. My parents. I had not seen them in 5 years. My father was yelling at the nurses, demanding the best surgeon in the building. My mother was crying, clutching her purse like it could somehow hold her together. They had no idea where they were, no idea who was about to walk into that room. I stepped forward, pulling on my gloves, focusing only on the patient. And then I saw her face. The woman on that table was my sister. The same sister who convinced my parents I was a failure. The same sister who destroyed my name, my future, and my place in that family. For a moment, everything inside me went completely still. Because now her life was in my hands. And the people who abandoned me were standing just outside, begging for someone to save their daughter. They had no idea that someone was me. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand how I went from being their invisible daughter to the one person they could not live without. I grew up in a house where everything looked perfect from the outside. We lived in a large waterfront home just outside Seattle. Clean lines, expensive furniture, the kind of place people admired without ever really knowing what went on inside. My parents, Richard and Elaine Bennett, built a successful real estate business from nothing. They believed in discipline, image, and results. In their world, people were measured by what they achieved and how they were perceived. There were 2 daughters in that house. My older sister, Lily, and me. Lily was everything my parents valued. She was confident, social, and effortlessly charming. She knew how to walk into a room and make people like her within seconds. At family events, she was the one telling stories, making people laugh, holding attention without trying. I was the opposite. I was quiet. I stayed in the background. I preferred textbooks over conversations, structure over chaos. While Lily thrived in social settings, I found comfort in studying, in understanding how things worked, in having control over something that made sense. At first, I thought we were just different. But as we grew older, I started to realize something else. The rules in our house were not the same for both of us. If Lily had a bad day, everything stopped. My parents would rearrange schedules, cancel plans, do whatever it took to make her feel better. If I achieved something, it barely registered. I remember coming home once with a state-level science award. I stood in the kitchen holding that certificate, waiting for my father to look at it. He glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, then went back to his phone. He said, "Achievements are good, Ava, but they do not define your value." Then he asked me to help Lily with something upstairs. That moment stayed with me. Not because he was cruel, but because he genuinely did not see me. There is a difference between being disliked and being invisible. When someone dislikes you, at least you matter enough to create a reaction. When you are invisible, it feels like you do not exist at all. So I adapted. I stopped expecting praise. I stopped sharing my wins. I focused on my own path quietly, building something that did not depend on their approval. I told myself I did not need their attention. I just needed to get out. What I did not realize was that the moment I stopped being invisible was the moment everything would fall apart. For most of my life, staying invisible kept me safe. I focused on my grades, kept my head down, and avoided anything that might draw attention. It was a quiet strategy, but it worked. Lily had the spotlight and I had peace. Until the day a letter arrived that changed everything. It was a thick envelope from a top medical school in Washington. I still remember standing in the kitchen, holding it in my hands, feeling my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. My father was sitting at the counter reviewing paperwork. He almost never paid attention to anything that belonged to me. But that day, he noticed. He looked at the return address, then handed the envelope to me. "Open it," he said. My hands were shaking as I pulled the letter out. I read the first line once. Then again, just to make sure I was not imagining it. I got in. For a second, the room felt completely still. Then something shifted. My father stood up and took the letter from me. He read it slowly, carefully. I watched his expression change in a way I had never seen before. For the first time in my life, he looked at me with respect. Not affection. Not warmth. Respect. My mother walked in a few minutes later, and within seconds she was on the phone telling people, "My daughter is going to be a doctor." It spread fast. The same house that barely noticed me suddenly felt different. Conversations changed. The way they spoke to me changed. I was no longer invisible. But across the room, Lily was watching. She was smiling. But it did not reach her eyes. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around her coffee mug, her knuckles pale. At the time, I thought she was just surprised. I thought maybe, for once, she was proud of me. What I did not understand was that this moment was not a celebration for her. It was a threat. Because for the first time in our lives, I was no longer standing in her shadow. And in her world, there was only room for one person in the spotlight. The change in Lily did not happen all at once. It was subtle at first. She started calling me more often. Texting me late at night. Asking how classes were going, if I was eating enough, if I was getting enough sleep. The same sister who barely acknowledged my existence growing up suddenly wanted to know everything about my life. At first, I did not question it. I thought maybe things were finally changing between us. A week before I moved to Seattle, she invited me to lunch. It was the first time she had ever done that. We sat at a quiet restaurant near the water, sunlight coming through the windows, everything feeling calm and normal. She leaned forward, smiling softly. "I am really proud of you, Ava," she said. It caught me off guard. I did not know how to respond. Then she asked me something simple. "Are you nervous?" And for the first time in a long time, I told the truth. I told her I was overwhelmed. That medical school felt intimidating. That everyone else seemed so confident and I was not sure if I could keep up. I admitted that some nights I felt like I was barely holding everything together. She listened carefully. She nodded at all the right moments. She asked more questions. "What stresses you out the most? Do you ever feel like you are losing control? How do you handle the pressure?" It felt like concern. It felt like support. But what I did not realize was that she was not listening to understand me. She was collecting information. Over the next 2 years, that pattern continued. Every time I felt exhausted, I told her. Every time I doubted myself, I texted her. When I complained about long nights and endless studying, she responded with reassurance. But behind the scenes, she was saving everything. Every message. Every vulnerable moment. Every sentence that could be taken out of context. When I said I was so tired I could not think straight, she stored it. When I joked that I needed something just to stay awake, she stored that too. She was not building a relationship. She was building a case. And I was handing her every piece of evidence she needed. Looking back now, the signs were obvious. But when you spend your whole life wanting someone to finally care about you, you do not question it when they finally do. You trust it. And that trust became the biggest mistake I ever made. The night everything collapsed started like any other. I was sitting in a quiet hospital hallway, just outside Ethan's room. He had fallen asleep after a long day of treatment, and for the first time in hours, things felt still. I had officially taken a leave of absence from medical school. Not because I failed. Not because I gave up. But because someone I loved was fighting for his life, and I refused to walk away. Everything was documented. Approved. Signed by the school. I thought it was temporary. I thought I would go back and finish what I started. Around 2 in the morning, my phone rang. It was my father. I remember feeling a strange sense of relief. I thought Lily had explained everything. I thought he was calling because he finally understood. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no warmth on the other end. Only silence for a second. Then his voice, cold and sharp. "Your sister told us everything." My stomach dropped. He did not ask a question. He did not give me a chance to explain. He started listing accusations. "You dropped out of school, you are abusing medication, you threw your future away for someone who is dragging you down." None of it made sense. I tried to interrupt. I told him about Ethan's diagnosis. About the leave of absence. About the paperwork. He did not listen. He raised his voice, cutting me off completely. "Do not lie to me, Ava." That was the moment I understood. This was not a conversation. This was a decision. He told me I had embarrassed the family. That I was no longer part of it. That he had already contacted lawyers to remove me from any financial support. Everything was done. Just like that. I stood there in the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what was happening. Then he said the one thing that ended everything. "Do not contact us again." The line went dead. 3 minutes. That was all it took to lose my entire family. No questions. No proof. No second chance. Just silence. The silence that followed was louder than anything I had ever experienced. No calls. No messages. No second thoughts. It was like I had disappeared overnight. For a while, I kept trying. I sent emails with documents attached. Official letters from the university. Medical reports from Ethan's doctors. Clear proof that everything Lily said was false. Every message came back undelivered. I called their numbers. Blocked. I mailed printed copies to the house. A week later, the envelope came back. Unopened. 3 words written across the front. Return to sender. That was when it finally sank in. They were not confused. They had made a choice. And they were not interested in hearing anything that challenged it. So I stopped trying. I went back upstairs to Ethan's room and sat beside his bed, watching the machines monitor his breathing. That was the only place I was still needed. That became my world. Days blurred together. Hospital rooms. Late nights. Vending machine coffee. Short naps in uncomfortable chairs. Quiet conversations in the dark when neither of us could sleep. When his condition finally stabilized months later, reality hit me all at once. I had no financial support. No safety net. No family to fall back on. Just debt, exhaustion, and a future that suddenly felt uncertain. Going back to medical school was not optional. It was the only way forward. I took out loans I had never imagined needing. I found the smallest apartment I could afford. I sold anything that was not essential. During the day, I studied. At night, I worked. Sometimes both blurred into each other until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. There were moments I stood in grocery store aisles calculating what I could afford. Moments I questioned if I was strong enough to keep going. But something inside me had shifted. I was not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I was trying to survive. And then, slowly, something else happened. I got stronger. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic way. But in quiet, steady steps. I stopped waiting for someone to come back for me. I started building a life that did not require anyone to. Something changes when you realize no one is coming to save you. At first, it feels heavy. Like everything is on your shoulders and there is no way out. But over time, that weight becomes something else. It becomes focus. I stopped thinking about what I lost. I stopped replaying that phone call in my head. I stopped wondering if they would ever reach out. Because none of that helped me move forward. So I put all of that energy into something I could control. My work. My studies became sharper. My attention to detail improved. I was no longer distracted by trying to earn approval that was never going to come. I learned faster. I worked harder. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed stability. Years passed like that. Long days. Longer nights. Small wins that slowly built into something bigger. Until one day, I walked across the stage and received my medical degree. There was no one from my family in the audience. No applause waiting for me at the end. But I did not feel empty. I felt steady. Because everything I had at that moment, I earned on my own. After graduation, I was accepted into a trauma surgery residency in Seattle. That was where everything changed again. The environment was intense. Fast-paced. Unforgiving. But for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who cared about competence, not image. People who respected what I could do, not how I looked. That was where I met Dr. Karen Mitchell. She was direct, disciplined, and impossible to impress. But she saw something in me. And instead of ignoring it, she challenged it. She pushed me to be better, sharper, more precise. For the first time, I had a mentor who did not overlook me. And I realized something important. I did not need my old life back. I was building a better one. Just when I thought the past was finally behind me, something started to feel off. At first, it was small. A quiet conversation between two administrators that stopped the moment I walked by. A brief pause during a routine review. Subtle shifts that did not make sense but were impossible to ignore. Then one evening, after a long shift, I was called into a private office. Human resources. They kept the tone professional. Calm. Controlled. They told me they had received several anonymous reports about me. Concerns about my behavior. Questions about my stability. Accusations that I might be misusing medication. For a moment, everything inside me went cold. Not because I believed it would ruin me, but because I knew exactly where it was coming from. The pattern was too familiar. The same narrative. The same accusations. The same twisted version of who I was. Lily. She had not let it go. Even after everything, she was still trying to turn her lie into reality. HR assured me there was no evidence. My records were clean. My performance reviews were strong. The complaints were flagged as unverified and likely malicious. But the message was clear. Someone wanted me to fall. Someone was still watching. I walked out of that office with a strange sense of clarity. I could have fought back immediately. Filed complaints. Taken legal action. Tried to expose everything. But I did not. Because I knew something they did not. The truth does not need to chase anything. It catches up on its own. And this time, I was not going to run toward the conflict. I was going to wait. Because sooner or later, the truth always finds its way into the light. The moment I recognized her, everything slowed down. Not the room. Not the team moving around me. Just me. Years of silence, betrayal, and distance collapsed into a single instant. Lily was lying on that table, barely conscious, her condition deteriorating fast. The monitors told the truth no one could argue with. She needed surgery. Immediately. There was no time to step away and process what I was feeling. No time to question whether I should be the one doing this. Because in that room, I was not a sister. I was a surgeon. My team looked at me, waiting for direction. I gave it. Prepare the ore. We are moving now. Everything after that moved with precision. Controlled. Focused. Familiar. I scrubbed in, the routine grounding me. Water running over my hands, steady and methodical. The same process I had followed hundreds of times before. But this time was different. Because I knew exactly who was on that table. And I knew exactly what she had done to me. For a brief moment, a thought crossed my mind. I could step aside. I could call another attending. No one would question it. No one would expect me to operate on someone who had been part of destroying my life. It would have been the easier choice. Cleaner. Emotionally safer. But that was not who I had become. I did not spend years rebuilding myself just to let the past dictate my actions in the one place where I had complete control. So I walked into that operating room. Not as someone seeking justice. Not as someone looking for revenge. But as someone who had made a promise the day I chose this profession. To do the job. No matter who was on the table. Hours passed in focused silence. Every decision had to be exact. Every movement deliberate. There was no space for distraction, no room for hesitation. And when it was over, her condition stabilized. She was going to survive. I removed my gloves, stepped back, and let the tension leave my body. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. The past had finally caught up to the present. And this time, it was not hiding in the shadows. It was lying under bright surgical lights, impossible to ignore. After the surgery, I stepped out into the waiting area. The shift from the operating room to that quiet hallway felt almost unreal. Inside, everything was controlled and precise. Out here, everything was uncertain. My parents were standing near the wall. 5 years. That was how long it had been since I last saw them. Time had changed them. My father looked older, the sharp confidence he once carried now replaced with tension. My mother's eyes were red, her hands trembling slightly as she held onto her purse. They did not recognize me at first. They were too focused on one question. Is she going to be okay? My father stepped toward me, his voice tight with urgency. Doctor, please. Tell me she is going to make it. I held his gaze for a second. Then I answered. The surgery was successful. She is stable. The next few hours are critical, but she is going to live. Relief hit them instantly. My mother covered her mouth, tears forming again. My father exhaled, his shoulders lowering for the first time since I walked in. And then he looked closer. Really looked. Confusion flickered across his face. Something about me did not match the image he expected. His eyes dropped to the badge clipped to my scrubs. I watched the moment everything connected. His expression changed. Not gradually. All at once. Ava, he said my name like he was not sure it was real. My mother turned, following his reaction. The second she saw my face, her entire body went still. No one spoke. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything that had never been said. I did not step closer. I did not offer comfort. I simply stood there, exactly where I was. Professional. Composed. A stranger. Because that was what they had made me. And now, they were seeing the result of that choice standing right in front of them. For a moment, No one moved. My father looked at me like he was trying to correct a mistake his mind refused to accept. "This does not make sense," he said quietly. "Your sister told us you left school. She said you were not stable." He could not even finish the sentence. Because the reality in front of him did not match the story he had believed for years. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I just spoke plainly. I never dropped out. I took a medical leave that was fully approved. I finished my degree. I work here. Simple. Direct. Undeniable. My mother shook her head slightly, as if she could undo the moment by refusing to accept it. But confusion quickly turned into something heavier. Doubt. Because now, there was a gap between what they had been told and what they were seeing. And that gap was getting wider with every second. A nurse walked by, greeting me by name. "Dr. Bennett, great work in there." It was routine. Normal. But to them, it was confirmation. This was real. The version of me they had erased was standing in front of them, fully formed, impossible to deny. My father's posture shifted. For the first time, uncertainty replaced control. "Are you saying," she lied? He did not sound angry. He sounded disoriented. Like someone realizing the ground beneath them was not as solid as they thought. I held his gaze. "I am saying you never asked me for the truth." That landed harder than anything else I could have said. Because it was not an accusation. It was a fact. And facts do not need to be repeated to be understood. The shift in their behavior did not happen slowly. It was immediate. The moment doubt turned into realization, everything about them changed. My father took a step closer, lowering his voice like the situation could still be managed. "Ava, we did not know. If there was a misunderstanding, we can fix it." Fix it. The word felt distant, almost out of place. Like he was talking about a business deal, not 5 years of silence. My mother moved beside him, her expression soft, almost pleading. "We should talk. Not here. Somewhere private. We can figure this out together." I looked at both of them. For years, I had imagined this moment. What I would say. How I would feel. Whether I would finally be heard. But standing there, I felt none of that. No anger. No relief. Just distance. "You already made your decision," I said calmly. My father shook his head. "We were misled. We believed what we were told. That does not have to define what happens next." He paused, then added something that revealed everything. "We can restore everything. Your place in the family. The financial support. The trust." There it was. The solution he understood best. Money. Control. Reversal through transaction. I held his gaze, steady and unmoved. "You cannot rebuild a relationship the same way you restructure an asset," I said. For the first time, he had no response. Because this was not a problem he could solve with resources. This was something else entirely. And he had no idea how to fix it. I saw Lily 2 weeks later. She had been discharged and was recovering at home. I chose a public place, a quiet coffee shop in Seattle. Neutral ground. No drama. No audience she could control. She walked in slowly, her movements careful, her confidence gone. For the first time in her life, she looked unsure of herself. She sat across from me, avoiding eye contact. I did not ask how she was feeling. I asked one question. Why she stayed silent for a long time. Then she let out a short, bitter breath and finally looked at me. "Because you were going to take everything from me," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the charm she used on everyone else. I was the one they noticed. I was the one who mattered. And then you got into medical school, and everything changed. She paused, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. You had something real. Something I could not compete with. And I knew once they saw that, I would lose my place. It was not anger in her eyes. It was fear. I did what I had to do to stay important, she added quietly. That was the truth. Not complicated. Not dramatic. Just insecurity turned into action. I sat back, taking it in. Years of damage, reduced to a single motivation. She was afraid of being replaced. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I just nodded once. That tells me everything I need to know, I said. Because at that point, there was nothing left to fix. Only something left to end. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. Not because I was angry. But because I was done. There is a difference between holding on to pain and learning from it. For a long time, I thought closure meant hearing an apology. I thought it meant someone admitting they were wrong and trying to make things right. But that is not always how it works. Sometimes closure is understanding the truth and deciding it no longer controls you. My parents reached out again after that. Calls. Messages. Attempts to meet. They wanted to explain. To reconnect. To move forward like nothing had happened. I did not respond. Not out of spite. But out of clarity. Because the life I built without them was not missing anything. I had my work. A career I fought for and earned. People who respected me for what I could do, not what I represented. I had stability. And more importantly, I had peace. That was something I never had growing up. If there is one thing this experience taught me, it is this. Family is not defined by who you are born to. It is defined by who stands with you when things fall apart. And success is not about proving people wrong. It is about building a life where their opinion no longer matters. If you have ever had to walk away from people you loved just to protect your own well-being, you understand how difficult that is. But you also understand something else. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below. You are not alone in this. And you are stronger than you think.